Wait! Don't shoot! We're just here to review the game! No! You idiot! Don't shoot everything you see! Is this a game to you?
Scars Above
is a third-person sci-fi action-adventure with Dark Soul elements and guns.
The story is you are on Earth, minding your own business when a huge alien ship appears outside of Earth, and you are chosen to be one of the astronauts to go to meet the aliens. Very quickly in the game, this alien ship transports you to a desolate alien world where you have to fight monsters, try to find your colleagues to know what happened to them, and to realize that some mysteries are not meant to be uncovered.
And the core of this game is shooting from guns. There's 6 different weapons, but only 4 elements. And these are electricity, cold, fire, and acid. And there's also 4 type of enemies and 4 type of environments as well.
This game takes a lot of inspiration from the Dark Souls series. You will see it very, very quickly. One element is the alien pillars that are basically like campfires. That if you go back to them, you reset your health and ammo, but also reset the enemies. Also, the combat involves a lot of rolling. So much rolling.
And a lot of death.
And dying a lot and restarting. And also something that's very Dark Soulsian is that the checkpoints, these alien pillars, are often set quite far apart from each other. And usually if you die far into a run, you have to restart, go through all of those small enemies again. So if you are not a very, very patient gamer, and if you don't like the Dark Soul type of games, this loop could get frustrating at some points.
Especially at the beginning, but we'll get to that a bit later. There are some skills also that like slow motion capsule that you can throw and slow time in that capsule for the enemy, or personal shield, or like a holographic yourself that you can throw like a bait to enemies. And there are exactly 22 upgrades, like a better shield, boost your ammo, that you are actually not upgrading by killing enemies, but finding these purple cubes that give you experiences, and for these experiences turns into points which you can buy the upgrades.
Trying to hunt down all of those is a bit interesting also, because usually they're not on the beaten path. You take a few side paths and have to explore a little bit to find as many of those cubes as you can. Also, while you're exploring, you are going to encounter situations where you have to investigate and where you have to solve puzzles. The investigation is kind of a light Sherlock Holmes style, where you scan a piece of machinery or a dead monster and try to figure out exactly how it works. Put all of that together to get some weapons upgrades or new equipment or things like this, because your character is actually a scientist. You will also encounter puzzles, which are very environmental puzzles. Maybe a little bit more challenging than the standard Skyrim or Assassin's Creed puzzle, but still not very taxing for the brain, trying to figure out how to get over a ravine, how to get through some gates and things like this.
And you also encounter some bosses, and then again they are more like a Dark Souls style, which means they are pretty hard to kill. There are some parts on their body that you have to concentrate on, and once you do, then they change how they attack.
Those boss battles are really the centerpieces of the game. They take a lot of time. You have to very carefully whittle down the health of the boss, figure out what its weaknesses are, figure out how it moves without getting just completely thrown across the arena and crushed on the rocks. And while you're trying to stay alive, it is very important to strategically use certain injections that will boost your health or cleanse you of poison, for example, or refresh your ammo. This does take a little bit of time, so finding the right moment to use the injections when the boss isn't too close and saving those up for the epic boss fights is a really key strategy in the game.
And now that we have covered the basics of the game, the question is,
should you play it? But first, you should know that usually our channel covers free games on the Epic Game Store. This is not free. It is a newly released game that the developers actually asked us to review. So they are sponsoring this video and provided the key. We are very grateful for that. And we are still going to give you a very honest opinion of the game, of course.
And let's go straight to it. because the game feels quite limited. It is very straightforward. It took me 5 hours to finish it. Honestly, I turned to easiest difficulty very soon, but
even being a fan of Dark Souls,
yeah, it's true that the hardest part is the beginning. After that, I feel like it gets quite easy because then you get all the weapons. And the most interesting part about this game are the weapons, especially the freezing weapon and the fire weapon. You can nicely play with it and
combine the damage and the effects.
So that's the cool thing, as well as that you can actually switch the difficulty at any point of the game. But since there are no any hidden things to uncover, and after you finish it, there's nothing to do. There's no new game plus. There's not even a possibility to go back into some missions and replay it. Just play it again. So I don't think this game is anything special. It's very, very normal. So unfortunately, I have to lean to no, because I finished the game, but I didn't enjoy it as much.
It's interesting because you are the Dark Souls fan, and I find this to be a very Dark Souls, let's say a Souls light. Not Souls like, but Souls light. It is definitely inspired by the Dark Souls series. But I am not a fan of the Dark Souls series.
That's true.
So I initially thought, okay, this is not going to be for me. Now let's get something out of the way. One thing that's very important for me in games is the story. If it's a good story, I'm going to be drawn through it. Not the case here. And I think there was a lot of potential, but a lot of missed opportunities also. Right from the beginning, when a huge alien ship appears over Earth, and this could be this really powerful, thoughtful moment about we're not alone in space anymore. But for the very first moment, the characters are just acting completely natural and unnatural, actually, in the situations. Like, hey, whoa, look what we get to do. Isn't this cool? And it just did not seem authentic. But then I very quickly decided, okay, this isn't about the story, it's about the combat. And this, I think, maybe because of not being such a huge fan of Dark Souls, as a Souls light game, I was able to get into it more easily. And you're right, the way that the weapons can interact with each other, and that the bosses are almost more like solving a puzzle. Now, a fast-paced puzzle that wants to murder you as quickly as possible, and you do have to restart often. But I found this interesting. Every time I felt like I was getting a little bit closer, and that at first it seemed impossible, and then I managed it. Usually for Dark Souls, what annoys me is when I die and then I have to go back through the small enemies. But this time, actually, I felt like it just made me more determined to not die, and made each run more tense, because I thought, I don't want to repeat this. I don't want to repeat this. Like, okay, I need to stay alive, and made things actually more intense.
Well, there's no sense in repeating, because you're not gaining skills by repeating things.
Also true. Usually this would annoy me, but somehow here it actually brought a sense of urgency to staying alive and not making mistakes. Overall, not the game of the year. I agree with you.
Definitely not for me.
And it's going to depend on the price, and the price is going to change over time and be different in different countries. So putting the price aside, I would say that if you like the idea of Dark Souls, but you find a lot of these Souls games to be actually too difficult, I think this could actually be a really entertaining option. The environment is really interesting and beautiful. There is a lot of creativity in the types of monsters and creatures that you encounter. And the creativity of the combat I found to be pretty engaging.
And I have to add that the first part, the jungle of the game, I enjoyed the least. So actually, right from the snowy mountains, the game gets better. So it does have a slow beginning, I would say.
Yeah. So one thing that isn't even really emphasized, but a lot of the environments, especially in the middle of the game, are really beautiful and interesting. And sometimes when there was no combat, I would just kind of like look at the landscapes that were very creative.
It is more story-based, so it is quite linear. There's no open areas, and there's a lot of invisible walls. It is more like a movie, perhaps.
But I never regretted like the time that I spent with it. I found it engaging and just challenging enough for me. Maybe a veteran Dark Souls person was finding it to be not challenging enough. Yeah. But it fit perfectly for me. And the last thing I would say, as someone who's not a fan of horror games, it was also kind of the perfect balance. There were some jump scares.
There were some, yeah.
When you thought you were alone and you suddenly you're not alone. It wasn't horror, but it was engaging and exciting enough that it was kind of perfect for me. Whether or not that fits you is up to you. So hopefully these two different opinions from different types of gamers is useful for you.
And this is a single player game, so if you want to play a game similar to this, but with more friends, there's a game called Remnant from the Ashes that we also reviewed, so you can watch the review next.
Hope that was useful. Let us know in the comments below what you think of Scars Above, coming out on February 28th, 2023.
And see you next time.
Bye.